Hi, Rich Leiter here. Welcome to The Naked Booktuber. Okay, I just finished reading Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus by Mary Shelley, and I wanted to give you some thoughts on it. Okay, here's my first thought. I agree that I think it is a good idea before you read this book to be somewhat familiar with Paradise Lost by John Milton, and I agree that it is also important for you to be familiar with the Prometheus myth, the Greek Prometheus myth of Prometheus giving mankind fire and being punished for it, having his liver eaten every day by a vulture and having it grow back and having it eaten again for the rest of eternity as punishment for it. Okay, it is important to be familiar with those. I mean, as far as the Paradise Lost goes, the whole notion of the monster being, or the creation of Victor Frankenstein being roughly analogous to Satan. Satan says, better to reign in hell than to serve in paradise. Well, yeah, I can kind of see that. The monster is saying to Frankenstein, if you can create a female counterpart for me, and I have to endure this complete isolation for the rest of my existence, being spurned by man, being a complete freak and an outcast, well, I'm going to wreak havoc on you and the rest of mankind for having done that. So yes, it is kind of like Satan saying, it's kind of like the perversity of Satan in a way. Okay, I get that. I don't really see the Prometheus myth being played out in modern times so much. First of all, who is Prometheus in Frankenstein? Is Victor Frankenstein Prometheus, the modern Prometheus? Remember, Prometheus gives mankind fire. It's a great boon for mankind. What does Victor Frankenstein give? He is able to create a living human being out of dead tissue, out of inanimate matter. Okay, that would have been a great boon for mankind. But what he ends up creating is in his mind, in his opinion, a hideous monster that must be destroyed at once. So he really hasn't given mankind any great boon after all. So the analogy kind of breaks down there. He's kind of the anti-Prometheus, if anything. On the other hand, is the monster Prometheus? Frankenstein is Prometheus to the extent that he has agonies and pangs of suffering every day of his life after he's created this being of his. In that sense, he and Prometheus are like, they both suffer a lot, but that's where the analogy breaks down, as I say. He's created a kind of not fire and a monstrosity. So similarly, for the monster itself, the creation itself, is he Prometheus? Again, he suffers cruelly every day of his existence also, but what boon does he bring to mankind? None, really. He just kind of brings destruction to Victor Frankenstein's family and friends. So the analogy is kind of tenuous to me at best. But the main problem that I have with Frankenstein, the novel, is not so much all of the ideas, the notion of the romantic sublime, the notion of the outcast, and the notion of Satan and Prometheus. That's okay, all that stuff. But the problem I have with it is the actual writing itself. I find the actual writing to be somewhat unbelievable. There are some major problems I have in taking the novel seriously, and the biggest one of them is this. So Frankenstein finally realizes his dream of creating a living being out of nothing, and the moment that he does this, he is horrified at what he has created. He just kind of sees this being, this distorted, disfigured being with moist, wet eyes, as he puts it, I guess, damp eyes, and he immediately runs out of his laboratory. He falls asleep all night long in exhaustion, and then he's so freaked out by this being he's created, he runs into the courtyard below his laboratory and just walks around for a while to sort of regain his composure, which he can't do. And then he walks out into the street and just wanders aimlessly in the street, dazed at the ugliness, the hideousness of what he has done. And this is like the biggest problem I have with this book. It's as if Frankenstein is kind of very immature. He's kind of like a jerk. He is only 19, but still, he kind of acts like a jerk. He kind of runs away from the creation and just kind of hopes that it'll all go away. You know, he's going to go on with his life in order to distract himself from what he has done. So he just kind of leaves the creature roaming around, this 8-foot tall monstrosity, wandering around. He doesn't even know where it is. And from that point on, he decides to study on a lark Oriental languages along with his friend Henry Clerval, just to distract himself more or less. Then 2 years go by, and nobody knows where the monster is. He doesn't know. He doesn't try to seek him out. He doesn't tell anybody what he has done. He just kind of, in a very simplistic way, says, gee, I hope this whole thing is over with now. Let's just forget this unfortunate occurrence. I mean, this is hard to take. And then, finally, after 2 years, when his younger brother, William, is strangled, is murdered by the creature, and Frankenstein is so overwrought with grief, what does he do? Does he warn his family that they too might be in imminent danger of being murdered by this thing that he has created? Does he feel any obligation to them to warn them about it? Does he feel any obligation to protect them? No, he sort of goes off on an excursion for 2 weeks to a village called Chamonix. So he leaves them in the lurch for 2 weeks, and he goes away just to sort of regain his composure. I find this difficult to believe. All throughout the whole novel, but for almost the entirety of the novel, almost the entirety of it, he tells nobody that about this thing he's created. One by one, the members of his family are killed by the creature. Justine Moritz, a friend, is killed by the creature. His best friend, Henry Clerval, is killed by the creature. And yet he tells nobody about this at all. doesn't make any sense to me. The normal thing to do that would be believable is that at some point, once he realizes that he's got a big problem here and that people are dying, he should have enough sense and responsibility to go to the authorities, to go to his family and say, look, this is what I've done. I know it sounds unbelievable, but I'm not a madman. And he can give them his papers and his notes, scientific notes or whatever, and convince them that this is on the level. And he says, we have to track down this creature, and we have to destroy it, or we have to stop it. And if the novel was devoted to that, to hunting down the creature, that would have been a more believable novel to me. As it stands, I mean, he does finally say, I must destroy this creature, but when does he say this? He says it virtually at the end of the novel, after his younger brother has been strangled, after his Henry Clerval, his friend, has been strangled, Justine Moritz has been framed for murder because of the monster, his wife, his betrothed, Elizabeth, his cousin who he married, Elizabeth, is strangled. Then he finally says, gee, maybe I should track down the monster and destroy it. A little bit too late, don't you think, Victor? That's like the biggest gap or flaw in the novel to me that makes me not want to take it seriously. He kind of acts like a jerk. Just this whole notion that he keeps this secret to himself is a kind of a hard pill to swallow for me. Yes, there are very, very nice descriptions of sublime nature, of thunderstorms in the Alps, and the majesty of nature in the tradition of the Romantics, of Wordsworth and Coleridge and Percy Shelley, the husband of Mary Shelley. Yes, that's very impressive. But the actual story, it seems kind of like a little bit too simplistic a fairy tale to me, with a lot of gaps in it. It's like there are so many transitions that take place in the story. I wish that Mary Shelley, had put more into, had bitten off a little bit less and gone into it in a little bit more depth than she did. She just kind of touches on certain things, but leaves me wanting more. The only sympathetic character in this novel for me was the creature, the monster. Again, I kind of thought that Victor Frankenstein acted as basically an immature, irresponsible jerk. When the being explains his history, what he's been doing for the last 2 years to Frankenstein, I found that to be the strongest part of the book. It was very moving. The way he's ostracized by all the villagers, he has to just survive totally alone by himself, and he finally, finds a hut to take shelter in, and there's an old blind man with 2 children, and he learns how to read and write and educate himself, and all he wants to do is to be accepted and to be loved by this family, if by nobody else in society. I mean, this is all very, very touching, it's so my sympathies lie with the creature, in the same way that the character of Satan in Paradise Lost is the most interesting and kind of sympathetic character in the poem as well. It's just very sketchy. There are other aspects to the novel that I found very sketchy. I mean, and a little silly. There are a couple more points I want to make. Victor Frankenstein and Mary Shelley never actually discuss how it is that after having created this being, that it has such intelligence, that it's such a feeling, emotional, sensitive being, that it has such a powerful intellect and reasoning capacity. It can teach itself how to read and write. I mean, it's very rational. I think it's wanting to have a mate is an extremely reasonable thing for it to have requested of Victor Frankenstein, its creator. So how did that come to be? It's one thing to give life to an inanimate object in the same way that you give life to maybe, a dead bug. Okay, so it's alive now. But to endow it with the capacity to reason and to feel is a whole different level. How did Frankenstein actually manage to do that? It's never really touched on. It's just I wish that had been discussed in a little. I mean, I'm not saying that Frankenstein has to give away his trade secrets as to how he created this being, but give us a little more information on how it came to be such a superbly reasoning and feeling creation. He doesn't do that. There are other things also. When Frankenstein agrees to create a female counterpart for the monster, he goes off to Scotland and he rents this hut or this hovel on the shores of Scotland, and he just takes his laboratory equipment, his chemical equipment with him, and he makes a laboratory out of the hut. It's a little, sketchy. And then one night, he goes in a skiff, to take a break from his work, and he goes 4 miles out to sea in a little skiff. 4 miles is a pretty long ways out. He could drift out to sea and be lost forever. In which case, he would never create the counterpart for his monster, his creation, in which case the monster will now wreak havoc on the rest of Frankenstein's family, and he'll murder other people out of a sense of bitterness and rage. So now, not only will Frankenstein be responsible for the deaths of his own family, but other people in the world. If he's lost in this skiff, it's a very irresponsible thing to do. And what does he do in the skiff? He sleeps all night in the skiff. He falls asleep, and his little sailboat just drifts. That doesn't make any sense to me. That's kind of stupid. And then the boat magically drifts back to shore, and who happens to be on the shore at the same time, at the same location, but his dead friend Henry Clerval? This is a little bit hokey to me. It's a little bit too broad a brushstroke that Mary Shelley is using to paint her novel with. And then at the very end of the novel, as Victor Frankenstein is dying, the monster confesses that even though he murdered the various members of Frankenstein's family, he didn't enjoy doing it. He says, it didn't give me any pleasure to do this. I don't know. It kind of sounds like it's tacked on. This notion that he felt no pleasure in killing these people, just to sort of make the character seem sympathetic in the way that the character of Satan in Paradise Lost is somewhat sympathetic. I don't know. It sounds a little bit arbitrary and a little bit artificial to me. Maybe that's just me. But once again, just to recap, the main problem I had with the book is the execution of it. There were just these obvious faux pas in the book. Why keep this information about this homicidal maniac to yourself, Victor Frankenstein, for almost the whole novel? Why do that, and why just try to act in denial about this maniac being on the loose until kind of the end of the novel when he says, yeah, I really should destroy this thing. This is just kind of crazy to me. So I don't consider this novel to be, it's okay to read. It was all right. I don't regret reading it. I don't think that it would be a waste of time reading this book. It's kind of a curiosity. I was just kind of surprised that it's touted as this great masterpiece, because I don't see it being on the same level as, say, a book like Heart of Darkness. I'm a little bit puzzled about it. It's kind of like a oversimplified fairy tale with lots of obvious gaps in it to me. That's kind of the way that I saw it. So that's my review of it. Tell me what you think. Tell me what I'm missing, or tell me why it's this great novel in terms of the actual writing of it. All right, thanks a lot.